At some point when the Rona started, I had a puppy, a young puppy, and I pulled everything into my living room, back cushions from my couches. I had an Amazon box with some plastic bottles in it. Like, I just made this crazy scene in the living room. She could walk over and walk through and get brave from, and all the things that we're talking about, the inclines, the unstable surfaces, all of that stuff came from just things I had around the house. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are here today to talk about puppy exercise guidelines. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sarah. Hey, Sarah.
Hey everyone.
All right. So first, I have a great story that illustrates everything we want to talk about puppy exercise. So Sarah, do you remember, it was years ago, back when you used to be in Jersey? I had a student with a lab puppy, and she said to me, he won't sleep at night. So I started an exercise program. So every night I take him around the block 4 times and he falls asleep. And you know what I said to her? I said, you're going to create an athlete because it's 4 times around the block now, but in 2 weeks, it's going to be 8 times around the block. And she's like, no, we're good. About a month later, she came back to class and she was like, you were right. I have to start earlier now because I don't have enough time. And now I'm trying to run him. And she just missed the whole mark. So I think what we're going to loop back around to is the idea that exercise is great and important and needed, but it has to be brain and body at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's what's so important, and what a lot of people, either they don't think of it or they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to challenge the dog while out on a walk, both mentally and physically.
Agreed. And so a lot of people, though, I don't know, probably where you are too, where your clients, a lot of people have 8-week-old puppies and they're like, how many miles can they walk?
Yeah.
In a stroller?
Yeah. A lot of times people, they don't realize, first of all, it's an age thing, right? How young or how old does a dog need to be until we can start doing these mileage? But also the whole thing is that you don't need to do all those miles, because really with the puppy's growth plates, they don't close until they're 18 to 24 months. So you can't do all those mileages that you want until they're older anyway.
Yeah. And I think the whole thing behind that is they want the puppy to be exhausted so they go to sleep. But it's like taking your toddler. Like, how many miles can your toddler go for a walk? Probably none, unless they're in a stroller. All right, so let's get to it. The guidelines. Let's start with the puppies 8 to 12 weeks old. Mm-hmm. So we're saying 15 to 20 minutes of a walk to start, depending on their breed and their size and their activity level. Also, let's talk about the environment. So if you're in Arizona in August, probably not 15 to 20 minutes. Or Florida, if it's really hot, you're going to go not as far and not as long. And if it's really cold, like Colorado, didn't you get snow a week ago?
Yeah, we got, and again, it's not uncommon here, but we got a spring snowstorm where we literally had like 3 feet of snow on the ground in the middle of March.
Yeah. So if you're in a snowstorm or an area where there's a lot of ice and it's really cold, think about the puppy. And, you're going to have to dress accordingly. But before we start into more detail, I want to say that when I lived in Florida, one of the things I always did was I put my hand on the pavement during the hot weather months, because if it was too hot for my hand, it's too hot for their feet. So mind the temperature and make sure that your puppy is comfortable wherever you're walking.
And I also, I can hear my clients asking me this question in their head, like if I was going over this with them, I know that some of the things that people will ask is, when the puppy's that young and they're not fully vaccinated, can they be out in these kinds of new environments? And what is kind of your best recommendation for with the vaccinations, and also making sure that we can get out and explore new things with the puppy?
Well, I'm always thinking that the puppy needs to have these experiences, and I'm not taking them where there's sick dogs, right? So, and I hear that a lot too. And the American Veterinary Behaviors Association put out a position paper in 2011 saying that puppies should get exposed to new things. They should be out and about. They're not the puppy in the plastic bubble. They shouldn't only be exposed to their yard and their house until they're 4 months old, which I've heard frequently in the time that I've been training. And it just scares me, but that's what people think. And then we see these puppies, right? When they come into classes at 4 or 5 months old and they've not seen the world, they're terrified of everything. So we like to say, we expose them to everything, but we protect them from anything. And I guess what that means is just be sensible, right?
Right. And also, and again, when we talk about exercise, this doesn't mean setting your puppy loose in a dog park. That's one of the worst things that you could do with your poor puppy. And again, we can do another episode on dog parks, but when we talk about physical and mental exercise and proper exposure, we're not talking about dog parks.
No, absolutely not. Pretty much ever. I'm not a fan of dog parks. I know you're not either. I'm a fan of planned activity with your dog's friends in safe environments, but I just don't like the risk factor. You know how much I dislike risk. And so dog parks are one of those things. So take your puppy somewhere safe where there are healthy dogs. That includes puppy classes. But this kind of, I feel like the guidelines of the walking, you're probably not going to be walking through a shelter or a disease-filled area, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Be sensible and you're going to do fine.
All right. So when we talk about the types of walks that you can do with your dogs, and we're trying to exercise them both mentally and physically, what are your favorite types of walks?
I love adventure walks. I love taking my dogs to an area, the woods pretty much, but if you don't have woods, an area where there are things they can climb up and over, because the woods and the outdoors, that's nature's gym, right? So I have tons of videos of my dogs when they were puppies climbing over logs, like really struggling to get over them. The terrain changes, the terrain being angled or going down. Like these are the things that strengthens your puppy's body. And they get fresh air, they get tired, but they get stronger. And the relationship bond, we can't not talk about that they get with you when you're out on a hike or you're out on an adventure walk like this is amazing, because they may not know where they are, but they know you. And so the bond gets even tighter because it's like you and your puppy and you're out together and you're going to support each other and you're going to have a good time.
And you're also you're exploring this whole new environment for them. So when we talk about the mental aspect of what an adventure walk does, is there are so many sights and sounds and sniffs, like the exposure that they get in those environments, that's what's doing the mental stuff there. And then like Kathy mentioned, there are aspects of like a name and run game and ditch. Like there's other things that we do on the walks to help challenge them mentally, but just being in those new environments is so valuable to them. Another thing you had mentioned earlier about the spring snows that I thought about too is, so let's say you do have a puppy and it is winter time. A great way to tire your puppy is take them out to a field with a long line and have them run through the snow. Not only are we working on your dog being comfortable and confident with something new and weird, right? They never felt snow before, but also there's resistance work, right? So when your puppy is chomping through that snow like a little bunny, you've added in the resistance work from the snow. That's also really going to help tire out your puppy too. So anytime that you have like on the adventure walks, let's say it's snowing or something, don't let that deter you from doing it. Maybe on the adventure walks, you can find a stream or a safe pond or a river or a safe swimming spot for the dog. That's another great opportunity to get some extra exercise in. That's not just the walking through the new trails.
And let's not forget about inclines, going uphill, downhill. All of that teaches the puppy proprioception and how to do weight distribution and shift their weight so they don't go head over paws down a hill, right? It's the greatest thing ever. If you have the opportunity, if you can find that resource, a place you can let your dog run where there are things like that, it's the best kind of exercise.
Yeah. All right. So we're still in the 8 to 12 week age group. How would you then, let's say, I don't know, whatever, the owner had a busy day, they can't get out and go somewhere with a puppy, but they still want to tire them out in the backyard or like with games, like with toys and stuff. What kind of things can they do to help work the dog both mentally and physically with toys?
Well, first, puppies are usually walking stomachs, right? So a good game of get the cookie is always great for exercise. And there's a few things to remember. So if you're going to play this game on pavement and it's black, make sure the cookie you throw is light colored so they can see it. Also understand that young puppies can't see really well, really far yet. So when you throw the piece of cheese that you show them 20 feet away, they're like, I don't see it. So it's better to put the cookie by their nose, let them follow it, and then sort of bowl it away a few feet. And then what you can do, even if you throw it 6 inches from your foot and you say, get it, while they're getting it, you can run 10 feet the other way. So when they eat the cookie and turn around, they got to run all the way to you and then drop another piece of food and run the other way. I like this game because not only does it exercise the puppy, but it also creates that come back on their name response. So I like when I'm getting the brain workout and the body workout and the training all done in one session.
Exactly. So if you're going to add in a toy to this, like maybe let's say the puppy likes to chase a Frisbee out in the yard or chase a tug toy or something like that. What kind of training would you do with them to tire them out both mentally and physically with a toy?
So you and I are both really careful about toys because we don't want dogs jumping, or young puppies especially, jumping straight up and landing wrong, right? So if it's a Frisbee, I'll start with tug on the Frisbee, right? And so I prefer tug games because I think that they need you for tug. Fetch games are cool, but once they leave your side and they get the ball, it's kind of theirs. And then there's ways we can work about the dog getting back to you. But my favorite games are tug. And so if I was going to want to do Frisbee down the line, Frisbee would first start out as a tug game with me. I get soft Frisbees and I teach the puppy to hold on to it. And Sarah, let's talk about tug a little bit because I don't think people teach it correctly initially. The dog gets it and then they pull really hard and yank it out of the dog's mouth, and that's no fun.
Yeah.
They have to let the puppy play with it and maybe even let go of it and be like, oh, look, you got your Frisbee. I play all these games, by the way, as I know you do, on a long line. Because when I'm playing a game with them, I don't want them trotting off and leaving the scene. So if they start to move away from me, I step on the line so they can't, but I also take it as a note that I'm not interesting enough. I'm not fun enough. And so then I level up my game to try to be more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, if you are, because I know there will be people who still do want to play with balls and they want to throw things, they do want to do the fetch aspect. One of the safest ways that you and I both, if we're going to do fetch or we're going to do some kind of game where the dog is chasing after something, what we'll do is we'll have the dog on a leash. If we are at a level in training where we can ask the dog for a sit or a down or some kind of control position, we will, or just hold the leash. We'll throw the ball and we'll wait for it to stop. Whether we can throw it into some bushes or behind a tree, but basically we wait for the ball to stop so that when we do then release the puppy to go find it, they're also in a game of search, right? So then they're not just like plummeting after the ball, because that's where we see injuries like ACL tears or CCL tears in dogs. That's where we then see those injuries where if they're chasing full throttle after a ball and it does a weird turn and then they sprint off with it, that's where some injuries will happen, especially with the younger puppies. So what you instead want to do is throw the toy out so that it kind of like rolls away and they have to go search for it. So then when they go sprinting after it, eventually they will naturally slow down as they get closer to it, because then they need to find it. They have to figure out where it is. So if you are going to do fetch games like that, that's an awesome way to tire your puppy, because you're also activating that little nose work game with it too. You're working impulse control in the beginning. If you can get a sit or a down, then throw the toy and send them after it. And then you're activating kind of a nose work type of game with them, which can really help tire them out as well.
Yeah, I've seen so many puppies get injuries from chasing balls that are bouncing wildly and they turn and they blow out an ACL or they hurt their shoulder. They're just making these erratic zigzags. What I did for one of my Goldens, I would cut tennis balls in half.
Yeah.
I throw them and they just land. There is no chasing involved, because I did have a dog who blew out her ACL chasing a tennis ball around the house. It was muddy and that was a whole show season. Yeah. Devoted then to rehab. So you got to be really careful. And especially that leaping up. I don't like dogs jumping straight up and then landing on their rear, whether they're a puppy or a dog. I just don't like that. So I'd rather do tug. Let's talk about a few things about tug though. Please don't shake your dog's head back and forth like you're going to give it whiplash. If you watch dogs play tug with another dog, they're pulling it, right? It's a give and take. They're not whiplashing back and forth. It's just not how they play. So that's a good way to start it. Also, Sarah, sometimes people play with their dogs with toys for exercise, but the dog doesn't want to give the toy back. Yeah. So that's where we like to have a second toy. We actually teach a toy switch game. And we have to get a video of this. I mean, we have it somewhere where I had my puppy tugging on this toy. And then I said, now tug on this toy. And she had to drop this one and grab this one. And so that's an impulse control game, which I think is really important. But let's not go there because we're going to jump off the exercise track.
I know. We're focusing. We're staying focused.
We're focusing. All right. Okay. So let's recap this. So if it's an 8 to 12-week-old puppy, we're saying 15 to 20 minutes on a walk. We're saying adventure walks. They can go a little bit longer. If we're playing tug, 5 to 10 minute sessions. You can't be that interesting for more than 10 minutes. Just don't even try. And I think fetch is the same time amount. Yeah. All right. So let's go to the next age group.
Yep. So 12 to 16 weeks, if we're still going back on the adventure walks, the walks around your neighborhood, all that kind of thing, try to make it as interesting as you can if you're just doing neighborhood stuff. That's actually a good time to mention. So kids' playgrounds or like parks and things like that. You can mimic what a dog might see on an adventure walk, like jumping over logs with the kids' playground equipment too. That's an awesome opportunity to teach them about proprioception, build their confidence, getting on new surfaces, get up on there with them. Kids' playgrounds are an awesome opportunity to challenge your dog both mentally and physically. So at 12 to 16 weeks, your sessions can be about 30 minutes to an hour.
And for those adventure walks, let's say you're listening to this and you're like, I live in an apartment in the middle of the city and I really can't go anywhere right now. And so what I would say to you is use the things you have in your house. So at some point when the Rona started, I had a puppy, a young puppy, and I pulled everything into my living room. I had a suitcase. Do you remember this, Sarah?
Yeah.
I had the back cushions from my couches. I had an Amazon box with some plastic bottles in it. Like I just made this crazy scene in the living room of all this crap that she could walk over and walk through and get brave from, and all the things that we're talking about, the inclines, the unstable surfaces, all of that stuff came from just things I had around the house. I didn't know I had that much crap around the house. But everything suddenly became, it's to get her to not be worried because I was in the same boat everybody else was. Yeah. I had a metal pot turned upside down. I had one that's right side up so she could put her foot in it. It was crazy. It was chaos, but it was good because she is fearless now. She just has to walk on anything.
Yeah, it's about creating obstacle courses for them kind of in the home when you're looking to do that. Also setting up in a hallway and just putting a bunch of pieces of equipment, put the puppy on one side, you go on the other side of the hallway, and then they come racing over after you. That's another good way you could set it up in the home. But even around an apartment complex, like a lot of times there's seating benches. There are like curbs that the cars park on. Like there's a ton of things that you can kind of like really get creative and like figure out a way, like how can I use this object to challenge my dog physically? That's always one of my favorite things.
And you see behind Sarah, she's got those fitness bones and the cones. Like you do not have to have a professional setup for this. You don't have to go out and buy hundreds of dollars of equipment for your dog, although it's fun and we tend to hoard those things. We have a dog school, right?
Yeah, don't judge us.
One year. So we have to have all the things. That's at least what I tell my husband.
But you can mimic a fit bone with a couch cushion, right? There's so many ways that you can do this stuff at home as well.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So let's go. So we're talking on those adventure walks, we're going 30 to 60 minutes now for that age puppy. Yeah.
12 to 16 weeks when we're moving into tug and fetch sessions. At this point, you've also now built a little bit more value for the game. You guys are a team when you're playing tug, you're doing fetch. There's a little bit more of a relationship there. So you can go for a longer period of time as well. So we're at about 10 to 15 minute mark.
Yep. And we're using those things now as rewards in training, right? Yep. So we're leveraging what they want into what we want. So a game of tug might show up after the dog sits. We're like, yes, get it, right? And play tug. We might call their name and they come. We might throw the tug toy through our legs. And when they get it, they run back to us and then we have the game there. So same thing with fetch. But we want to start incorporating all of these fun things into all the things that we think are equally fun, which are commands.
Yeah. And my absolute favorite way to tire out a puppy quickly is these kinds of games, right? Because you're adding in the physical aspect to these mental games. Like you said, you recall the puppy, they come flying back at you, you throw the toy 10 feet that way. Like it's so awesome to be able to use that tug toy as a reward. And whether it's a tug toy, a frisbee, a ball, I don't care. Whatever or food. You can still do this with food. If your puppy's not super toy motivated, the same thing Kathy was talking about earlier, you could just throw the food instead. It's such an awesome way to really get both the mental and physical energy out of your dog.
And I think it's worth noting that you have to bring the energy to the table. Now, if you happen to have one of those dogs like Sarah and I do, who can't wait to train and they're always on and they're there, you don't have to do this as much. Although if you watch us train, you think we were pretty wild because it's like, hey, we're like so into it and it tires us out too. So you have to know if your puppy's not that into it, you've got to level up and be more exciting. When you throw something, don't just stand there like a bump on a log. right?
Mm-hmm.
The puppy's coming to you, say yes, and then take off running and surprise him. He's going to be like, oh, holy hell, where are you going? And they'll chase you, right? So bring the energy into the session, which then wraps back around to, if you don't feel it, if you're not excited to do it, you probably shouldn't do it because your dog is going to know. So if you're like, oh, I got to play with the dog, like don't even bother. Maybe go for a walk, but you've got to find it within you because a lot of dogs need your drive and excitement to find the love and the joy in the training. Mm-hmm. So make sure that you're feeling it. And if you don't have energy to do it, you better get some, because really, again, I say it all the time. If your dog is a reflection of you as a trainer, and that goes the same for playing. If you're like, I'm tugging, they're going to be like, yeah, whatever. So
they're not, if you're not into it, they're not going to be into it.
No. And it should be the best part of your day and the best part of their day.
Yeah. Okay. So 4 to 8 month old, we're going to jump up to the next age group. So 4 to 8 months old, if we're now doing the adventure walks, training walks, whatever they are, we're at about the 1 hour mark, of course, making sure, give them water when they need, take breaks as you need. But within that age group, you can go for about an hour at a time.
And this is the naughty age.
Yeah. You're heading into adolescence.
They start at 5 months, but like 8 months is where, man, they hit it. Even people with amazing puppies who've never done a thing wrong, at 8 months, they're like, what happened to my puppy? Where's the puppy that was so good? So these things become even more important. The exercise factor for the brain and for the body, and the training for the relationship. So it's really a critical piece of your puppy's life for many different reasons, and certainly not just straight up to wear them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then if we're moving into 4 to 8 months again with tug and fetch sessions, you're at about 15, 20 minutes at a time. And also remember, so my border collies are now 5 years old. I will not do a big block more than, if I'm doing like tug and fetch kind of things, I won't do more than half hour at a time. Because again, I don't want to create an athlete that needs to work for 3 hours a day in order to be tired. A half hour, a couple times a day is more than enough, unless we're like specifically working for our sport and stuff. But about 30 minutes would be as long as I would go, because again, you don't want to create a dog who needs more than you can give them every single day.
And you want the dog to leave the session going, oh, can we do one more? And you're like, no, not today.
Yeah.
See you later. And they're like, oh, I want to do it again. I never, ever want to end a session where the dog is like, are we done? What time is it?
Yeah. And that's such an important thing that a lot of times owners don't think of, is to end it while the dog still wants more. Because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, you still want you still want one more? Okay, I'll throw it again. I'll throw it again. Whereas instead you want to keep an eye on them, watch body language, or learn when your dog is telling you that they're getting tired, and end it before they choose to.
Yeah. When I started out training a million years ago, I was an overtrainer. Like, my name is
Kathy. Guilty.
Overtrainer. Yeah. Because you just love it so much. And then especially when you're perfecting things for dog sports, you're like, just one more rep. And what you're doing is you're taking the joy out of it, because you're getting so tense about it and focused on it needing to be right. The dog is like, what the hell? It's not fun anymore. And over the last decade, the fun and play has really come into training a lot more. And I think that's why we have dogs that are so much more joyful about it. And if you're smart about leaving them wanting more, they're really excited to start training.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some like the references and other things we're going to have for you guys in the show notes. We're going to have an article on the puppy growth plates, because that's usually a really big question that we get from students about, like, when is it safe to do certain exercises? We have a great article on that. We can also share the article about vaccines and socialization and everything when the puppies are young. Kathy, anything else you want to touch on with this?
No, but I do want to mention that I want them to schedule in these sessions for their puppy. Schedule it in like it's a hair appointment or it's a doctor appointment. Like, if you're not used to doing this, you will say, I'll do it later, and later is tomorrow, and it never gets done. So make sure that you have a plan, write it out, pick 3 things you're going to do that are really going to be fun on this walk or the adventure walk or just around your neighborhood, or even in your living room, set something up, but just make it a priority, because puppyhood does end. And eventually it ends, not soon enough. So you got to get all these things in there now, make it a habit, and it's something you can continue for the life of your dog.